First, I'm Ashley Ditton. I'm a senior researcher, and I led the research for this project with Education Northwest. I'm joined by two colleagues from our larger team that worked on this project. Elizabeth and Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Gandhi, and I'm a senior research and evaluation advisor at Education Northwest, and I'm excited to be with you all today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Taylor. I'm a researcher at Education Northwest, and I'm also happy to be joining you today.
Thank you both. So for those who may not be familiar with our organization, Education Northwest is a nonprofit organization out of Portland, Oregon, with over 50 years of experience in rigorous research and evaluation, strategic communications and dissemination, and technical support and training. We have conducted multiple evaluations of out-of-school time STEM programming and are excited to be a part of this landscape scan that was brought upon by Overdeck Family Foundation. So now, Gemma, I'd like you to introduce yourself and the motivation for why Overdeck Family Foundation was interested in this work.
Thanks, Ashley. Hi, this is Gemma Lenowitz with Overdeck Family Foundation. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share this project today and eager to hear as you all consider its implications for out-of-school STEM programs, communities, and kids. Thank you all very much for joining. The goal of the Inspired Minds portfolio is to improve access to out-of-school STEM opportunities, to allow children to unlock their curiosity and explore mind-expanding challenges. So as a national funder, we support programs across the country. Some are early with a few hundred students, and others are national with hundreds of thousands of students. All share the goal of positively impacting students' STEM knowledge, skills, and mindsets. So here you can see a sample of our grantees in the Inspired Minds portfolio across both early and growth stages. The analysis that we're discussing today addresses two key considerations that Overdeck Family Foundation uses when making an investment. That's evidence of impact and ability to scale. The Inspired Minds portfolio focuses on supporting STEM learning in settings outside the classroom, a wide swath of programs in after school, summer, museums, and informal time with family. For this project, we asked the team at Education Northwest to focus their analysis on programs up to and through age 14, and those which met minimum dosage that research shows us is needed to create a meaningful difference for a child's STEM mindsets and skills. The goal of this work was to better understand what programs and program elements have been successful in scaling up to regional and national levels. We are also interested in the evidence that these programs meet their academic and social goals with students, particularly students who are traditionally underrepresented in STEM. The recent NSF-funded convening on common measures in STEM articulated a whole range of intended outcomes of after-school STEM programs and mapped those onto the existing measurement and evaluation tools. The research presented today will layer on additional dimensions from the Coburn models of scale: breadth, depth, sustainability, and ownership, to help all of us understand the scaled impact of a program and its trajectory over time. We believe this analysis will be helpful to both early stage and growth stage organizations. For programs just starting out on your STEM journey, we hope that learning about the best practices in the landscape will help you iterate your model and create a scaling plan that maximizes your reach and impact. And for more established organizations, we hope this report gives you the tools and resources you need as you plan on growing responsibly and sustainably, particularly in this challenging environment. For intermediaries and funders, this analysis can guide what to look for when supporting the field with technical assistance and capacity building. The models for program scale outlined here give us a framework for strengthening the out-of-school time STEM field so that more high-quality programs are available to more children across this country. As you listen today, if you have ideas about how your organization can collaborate with Overdeck Family Foundation toward this goal, don't hesitate to reach out to me at gemma@overdeck.org. And one more moment of gratitude for the team at Education Northwest. Thank you all so much for supporting today, and I'll pass it back to them.
All right, thank you, Gemma. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us, and I'm excited about this work. So now on to Sarah for our first poll.
Thanks so much. Great. So now we'd like to give the audience an opportunity to let us know who is out there. I've just activated a poll, and we'd like for you to please select which answer most closely matches how you see your role. And I see we already have a lot of votes coming in. Wow. Okay. We've got program leaders, educators and facilitators, funders, researchers, all kinds of joiners. Let's see. I see quite a few program leaders, educators, and facilitators, though. Excellent. And we'll give it just another second. Okay, looks like about everybody is in here. All right, looks like we mostly have program leaders, but we have quite a few of everybody else as well.
There we go.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Sarah.
You bet.
And now, so during this discussion, we're going to cover our landscape scan methods, what we found in our scan as regarding to how programs scale and the evidence they bring to bear when they scale, and recommendations from our findings. Sorry, this is decided. There we go. In the end, we'll leave time to discuss next steps and to go through any Q&A that we have. As a note, we've received a few questions in our registration regarding the coronavirus pandemic. Just to let you know, we conducted all of our research and based all of our findings on information gathered prior to the start of the pandemic. That being said, we've heard from partners that this time, while presenting extraordinary challenges, also presents some unique opportunities for reflection and planning that could help to facilitate quality scaling. So while our findings may not relate directly to the pandemic, we hope that the findings will be helpful for those considering scaling during this time. Again, we can follow up with any questions that you might have after we get through. All right, Sarah, now on to you for the next poll.
Yeah, thanks. So now we'd like to hear about your knowledge on the topic of out-of-school time STEM. I've just launched another poll with 4 options to tell us more about how familiar you are with out-of-school time STEM. So this is kind of a fun poll because you can think about it in terms of how much knowledge you have and what it fits on. So maybe you have a child or niece who participated in a STEM program, or maybe you yourself have facilitated an after-school STEM program. Whatever it may be, I think you can probably see these are really fun options to talk about your knowledge. Let's give it just another minute. We have a lot of votes coming in. A lot of people say that they have a chart pack paper worth of knowledge. And after that, a lot of people have a flash drive worth of knowledge. That's a lot. That's great. All right, so just a couple of seconds. We have a lot of votes in. All right, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. Okay, very cool, 42%. So that's quite a few people who have a pretty good baseline of knowledge. We appreciate you joining to hear more about what we found on during this study.
Great, thank you, Sarah.
You bet.
All right. So now we're going to go through this section and give us an opportunity to describe what we did in this landscape scan. So first, as Gemma mentioned, we used a set of program criteria that we developed with Overdeck to help guide this process. So as those of you who have the chart pack and flash drive amount of information know, out-of-school time STEM is a large bucket, and there are many types of programs, models, curricula, and activities that can fit into that bucket. So we chose to refine our search to programs and models that met a specific set of criteria. First, they provide implementation support to educators, and these educators could include teachers or out-of-school time program facilitators. Accordingly, we did not include activities, curricula, or platforms that stand alone or give educators only written guidance on how to implement them. Instead, we included programs that allow educators to be connected to a central office, a network of educators, or some form of support for implementation. These can be programs that focused on STEM exclusively, or STEM models that may be implemented in broader out-of-school time STEM programs or camps. Second, we looked at those programs that reach students who are age 5 to 14-year-old for at least 20 hours of STEM programming. Finally, because we're looking at program scale, we limited our search to those programs that have expanded to at least more than one city, if not regionally or nationally. And as you'll see, most of the programs in our scan fit that regional or national description. So we went through, a couple of steps for our landscape scan. First, we conducted a preliminary document and web search. Using academic literature and white papers, as well as websites of key intermediary, research, and funding organizations in the out-of-school time STEM fields. We generated a list of out-of-school time STEM programs that we thought might meet our criteria. We then analyzed listed programs' websites to determine which ones did in fact meet that criteria. We also used this opportunity to gather literature on programs' evidence of student, educator, community, or program outcomes. Next, we interviewed 11 key informant individuals from 7 intermediary, research, and funding organizations in the field. We used this opportunity to help discuss what were the trends in out-of-school time STEM field and what should we be looking for in these programs. We then used the findings from these first 2 phases to develop and refine a survey that we sent to leaders of 35 out-of-school time STEM programs. Through discussions with program leaders, about 8 of these were removed from the list because they didn't meet the criteria for inclusion. Of the 27 remaining programs, 25 responded to our survey for a 93% response rate. So informed by this survey, researchers then conducted interviews with 12 individuals from programs who completed the survey that allowed us to not only understand those characteristics, key features, but also helped us understand how those program features and practices scale up, as well as more information about the leadership, culture, and funding processes of the organization. Finally, we conducted interviews with individuals from large youth development organizations, including 21st Century Community Learning Centers, Boys and Girls Club of America, Campfire, Girls Inc., and the YUSA or YMCA. Although these organizations do not exclusively focus on STEM, their ability to serve numbers of students across the country makes their insight into scaling out of school time STEM programming important. So the findings from each stage of this process were used to refine the activities of later stages. For instance, the information gathered from key informant interviews was used to later refine the program list and questions for the program leader survey. These activities are all described in greater detail in our report, Scaling Out of School Time STEM Programming, a National Scan, which will be made available following the webinar. Today, we're going to discuss just the key findings from this report. So we'll start out with a brief overview of characteristics and features of the programs we identified in our landscape scan. The 25 programs that we surveyed that met our criteria have varied characteristics, but there are a few trends across programs. 84% said they serve middle school students, and all but 2 of these 21 programs serve other grade bands as well, either elementary school students or high school students or both. This focus on middle school students is kind of to be expected, considering one of our criteria was that programs focus on students aged 5 through 14. About 3/4 of our programs operate in after school, while 64% have summer programs and 52% operate on the weekends. A few programs also have offerings that they offer during the school day. Most programs take place in a school or community-based organizations. About half of the programs also operate in a community center, university or college campus, a science center or museum, or a camp and retreat center. Some programs also said they operate out of libraries. We also asked programs what activities they offer. Most offer a range of STEM activities that could include multiple aspects of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Some focus in a little bit more on specific aspects of STEM, For instance, about half of programs focus some of their energies, some or all of their energies on engineering or computer science and computer programming. Next, we asked programs to indicate the youth that they prioritize in their programs. 3/4 of programs prioritize specific underserved groups, including youth of color, youth in low-income communities, girls, and youth in rural environments. However, the strategies these programs describe to prioritize underrepresented youth vary. Some interviewees said that the population being prioritized was flexible and that sites could determine the underrepresented priority most in need of the program within their own communities. Other programs, such as a few that prioritize girls, made recruitment and enrollment of that underserved population a fundamental required element of their programming. So that varied a little bit. We also asked programs to indicate whether they include features that engage youth intellectually, academically, socially, and emotionally. All programs offer hands-on experience for youth. Key informants that we talked with discussed the importance of these experiences, especially for youth students traditionally underrepresented in STEM, who may not have access to these types of learning opportunities in other environments. Program and youth development organization interviewees also emphasized the importance of hands-on programming, describing it as project-based and including key aspects such as design thinking and creative problem solving. Program, youth development organization, and key informant interviewees described the importance of providing opportunities for youth to experience persistence and to take risks in STEM activities, and how this was a fundamental element of students learning in STEM. Most programs, about 3/4, have some sort of sustained STEM practice, which makes this type of risk-taking and persistence possible. Although less than half of programs focus on building deep adult-youth relationships, both program and key informant interviewees emphasize the importance of providing students with access to STEM mentors who are trained to support youth learning. We also ask programs to indicate whether they include features that respond to young people's interests, experience, and cultural practices. Most programs include elements of youth collaboration, and many provide youth-driven activities. Interviewees said that they were asked to describe what aspects of their program they considered to be non-negotiable elements of their programs. And many program interviewees said that fostering peer-to-peer sharing, youth-driven programming were non-negotiable aspects of their programming. Key informants also described how building collaborative skills is a key benefit of STEM programming. Additionally, many programs use culturally relevant and socially meaningful STEM projects for youth, which key informants talked about as critical elements of making sure that these aspects of programming could be scaled to multiple sites. In other words, maintaining cultural relevant and socially meaningful aspects of flexible youth programming makes sure that these programs can be taken up into new sites as they are made available. We also ask programs to describe the extent to which they connect out-of-school time STEM learning to school and other settings. While 2/3 of programs connect out-of-school time and school day learning, only 1/3 do so through direct communications between out-of-school time and in-school educators. Many key informants said that programs connect out-of-school time and school day learning by using things like next generation science standards or other school standards to connect and to drive their curriculum. This may account for some of the difference between those that connect out-of-school time and school day learning and those that do it through direct connections between educators. Finally, we talked about staff training. We asked programs to indicate whether they included features that build capacity in educators. Most programs offer a full or multi-day in-person training or consistent network of support, in addition to some online resources or short training sessions. The content of training sessions is key to successful scaling of programs, and out-of-school time STEM practitioners often lack scientific expertise or basic teaching skills, which can hinder the implementation of program content. all the programs that we talked with provide staff members with training on specific program elements. Most also offer training in STEM skills, relationship building, and promoting self through STEM. These findings were reflected in program interviews as key aspects of ensuring that educators were prepared for providing programming. However, in addition to emphasizing the importance of investing in professional development for educators, programs describe staffing as one of the largest barriers to scaling. The learning curve associated with implementing a new program and the challenge of trying to continue implementing a program without specific professional development are key challenges that they face. As indicated in surveys, about half of programs recruit certified educators and out-of-school time educators with STEM experience to help run their programs. However, other programs recruit college students, parents, or other family members, or STEM experts in the community, such as engineers, who may not experience the same level of retention as career educators. Thus, whenever possible, staff turnover should be addressed in scaling out-of-school time STEM programs. All right, and now I'll pass it on to Elizabeth, who will share more about bringing a program to scale.
Great. So yes, so in this next section, we asked programs to describe the extent to which they have scaled, as well as the strategies that they use to scale their programming. So we asked programs to describe their geographic spread, and overall 88% of programs have locations across the country. 8% have a more regional distribution, and 4% are concentrated in just one state. So although most programs served 100 sites or fewer, the number of sites implementing programs from our scan varied considerably. Most programs have grown at a relatively steady rate over the past 10 years. We also asked programs to describe the vision for growth that guides their scaled programming. So in terms of site recruitment, we asked programs how they recruit sites. And most programs said they do so by building relationships through networking, or outreach to existing OST programs. And then others said outreach to school or districts. Social media and conferences also play an important role for a little more than half of programs. In terms of funding, scaled programs require access to consistent and adequate funding, yet funding is one of the primary challenges that OST programs face in implementing science activities. Adequate funding can ensure that high quality, regularly scheduled science activities remain a top priority for OST programs. We asked programs about their sources of funding, and most said they engage in fundraising led by the central organization, which was 83%, and or through foundations or sponsors, which was also 83%. In addition, 67% of organizations work off of a grant cycle, and 13% have youth pay for their own programming. Other sources of funding include federal funding, like Title I or taxpayer-supported funding, as well as school, district, university, or local organization funding. So access to consistent multi-year funding was seen as a critical support for programs to use as they scale. And key informants also emphasized that this funding should be able to be used for the administrative tasks of scaling rather than just for program implementation. One of the most consistent themes that we heard from program YDO and key informant interviewees was that the importance of ensuring community fit and using adaptable program elements to build ownership among local actors. So key informants emphasize the importance of building the program in and through the community with which the program works. Program leaders describe the flexible or adaptable items generally as differences that can foster ownership among sites. So for example, coastal sites may focus on marine issues, and those in the Midwest may focus on farming issues. So that allows educators and students to feel more tied to the work. So we were also interested in the evidence that scaled programs gather to demonstrate their effectiveness. So this next section is focused on the information that we gathered through our surveys and interviews. We also did a literature review meant to provide an overview of publicly available evidence for these programs. And the information from this literature review will also be made available in the report that will follow. So key informants, as well as program and YDO interviewees, said students' growth in their ability to solve problems and their overall confidence and abilities in STEM were the greatest benefits of including STEM programming in OST. In the survey, we asked programs to list the STEM outcomes that they evaluate for students. And overall, 92% of programs measure STEM attitudes, including interest, identity, and confidence. And 83% measure STEM career interest. In addition, 63% measure STEM knowledge, but only 46% do so by measuring STEM performance in the program through pre- and post-tests or through other means. We also asked programs what school-based outcomes they evaluate for students. And overall, 29% of programs track STEM course taking in high school and college. 25% track math achievement, as well as promotion and graduation. And 21% track school engagement and science achievement. Only 8% of the programs do not measure any student outcomes. So a few programs consider deep learning among educators to be a critical element of educator engagement. For example, training and professional development offered by Camp Invention, GEMS, and Girl Start are designed to influence educators' overall teaching strategies. However, programs were limited in their evaluation of educator outcomes. So in fact, many programs indicated in surveys and interviews that they did not measure educator outcomes. And those that do indicated they survey educators for either STEM knowledge, skills, and confidence, or for feedback on their overall program experience. So although key informants discussed at length how family and community involvement was key for successful programming, this topic was addressed less frequently in program interviews. In the survey, a few programs indicated that they measure outcomes for families or communities, including surveying families and community partners for feedback. And a few programs also indicated that they had done family surveys in the past, but they had run into challenges with response rates, and so they decided to no longer conduct these surveys. Program leaders were also asked to indicate how they measure the quality of the program as it is implemented in multiple locales. And overall, 92% performed site visits to observe implementation fidelity at local affiliates, and 58% use an external evaluator. Other methods were administering educator surveys and having partners do their own implementation evaluation. One program said that it used an external evaluator during key points in the development phase, but does not evaluate new implementation. So key informants also emphasize that to inform continuous improvement, the data should be intentional and usable so that programs can understand what adaptations are needed. A few key informants said overly cumbersome or prescriptive approaches to evaluation can leave site leaders without a clear path of how to make decisions based on the data they receive, thus making it hard to justify their efforts. Program interviewees emphasize the importance of gathering and using data for continuous improvement, and many program interviewees described their program activities as data-driven and evidence-based. So now I'll pass it back to Ashley to talk about some recommendations.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. Based on these findings, we developed a series of recommendations for out-of-school time STEM programs looking to scale. Again, these recommendations are based on the findings from programs that met our criteria. So the program must provide implementation support to sites and staff members. The program serves ages 5 through 14 for about 20 hours or more. And the program has extended to operate in more than one city, but preferably regionally or nationally. While further research is really necessary to see if these recommendations extend beyond the programs that met these specific sets of criteria, we believe these recommendations can really serve as a useful guide for out-of-school time STEM programming more generally, and those programs that are seeking to scale. So interviewees throughout our scan discussed the need for scaling a program to fill the gap in the local community. In order to do this, programs should conduct needs sensing to ensure that the program both fills a need in the local community and is a viable option for long-term investment in that community. Additionally, communities need clear evidence that the programming fits with the youth represented in their communities before you can start to see that buy-in. Programs can help with this by providing future sites with data and evidence that include things like sample characteristics, so that communities can understand the likelihood that the program will demonstrate similar success as it has in other locales. Finally, to ensure that new sites have what they need to be successful, programs should have the new site prepare community partnerships ahead of implementation. This was suggested by program leaders and key informants as a way of making sure that the program fit is evident to not only those programs that are scaling and those that are considering implementing that new program, but also to the community at large. In addition to ensuring that the fundamental program elements fit the need of the local community, elements of the program should also remain adaptable to further fit the needs of these communities. Programs should provide opportunities for sites to build culturally responsive and socially meaningful experiences for youth by ensuring that the components of the programming are adaptable to the community and population being served. We heard this again and again in our discussions with both key informants and program leaders. While it certainly provides added challenges to ensure that scalable program elements are also flexible, this was a key finding in our conversation. Again, things like allowing coastal programs to take up marine issues and Midwestern programs to take up farming issues can be helpful, but also it can include things like flexibility in the timing and the administration of program activities. In addition to making program elements flexible, programs should go further and support activities for educators to increase ownership over their program. For instance, programs can coach educators on strategies that they could use for investigating and developing adaptable program elements. This can really build that ownership that's key for scaling programming. And while the adaptable elements of this program, these programs can vary across sites, programs also need to remember to continue to measure the non-negotiable elements, such as the use of program materials, youth collaboration, ensuring that the dosage is met, to make sure that implementation fidelity is still occurring across sites. This will ensure that participants can have access to high quality programming no matter what site they're attending. And this will have the greatest chance for each of these participants to receive program benefits that are promised through prior evaluations. Additionally, capacity, financial, institutional, human, are all key to successful program scale. However, program leaders consistently identified challenges ensuring that programs had the capacity that they needed to scale. First, the scaling program should have adequate funding at both the local and regional or national level, including funds that are designated to the administrative activities of scaling, rather than funds that are solely for program delivery. Interviewees also suggested multi-year funding as a strategy that would provide programs the capacity that they needed to scale. Additionally, key informants discussed the need for programs to prepare policies and infrastructure in place at the regional or national level that can support sustainable scaling. For example, a program-wide theory of change and vision for scaling can ensure that sites are consistently supported in their implementation across the country. Building educator capacity can also ensure that scaled programs are implemented successfully in multiple sites. Programs should invest in deep learning among educators by providing training that builds more than just program knowledge, but also things like building positive youth relationships and confidence in STEM skills, confidence in educating, etc., by building networks of support among educators. Programs could consider a train-the-trainer model that could help build this long-term capacity in educators. Related to this, while educators' knowledge and skills are key to successful program scale, educator turnover is a serious problem for out-of-school time STEM programs. Therefore, programs should consider developing strategies to reduce educator turnover in programs. Finally, data and evidence play an important role in communicating the effectiveness of programs both externally to funders and to the communities that may support scale. However, data and evidence are also key for informing the adaptation practices for continuous improvement in programs themselves. So to make sure that all sites can engage in continuous improvement activities, ensure that the data collected are both relevant and useful for local sites. This data could include information on both how to improve the quality of service delivery and the outcomes the program provides for students, but also educators, families, and communities where possible. Additionally, while many programs currently measure student outcomes in STEM, consider expanding data and evidence to include academic and social and emotional outcomes. Additionally, educator, family, and community outcomes in programs are currently under-evaluated, even though their importance is noted throughout the literature and in conversations that we had with key informants and with some programs. Programs should invest in measuring educator, family, and community outcomes to continuously improve the quality of service delivery and the effectiveness of programming. Finally, even if relevant, useful, and wide-ranging data and evidence is collected, the data still needs to be usable by local sites. Programs should provide existing sites with feedback on data and evidence in a way that they can both understand and apply the findings to their own practice. One strategy programs may consider to build site capacity is to use data and evidence is to offer trainings on data use. Additionally, programs should communicate outcomes to families and community stakeholders in a way that allows these stakeholders to see the impact of students and contributes to building those lines of communication that are so important to seeing successful student outcomes in out-of-school time STEM. Okay, so now I'll have Sarah guide us through our next interactive activity.
Thanks, Ashley. I appreciate that. So next, we'd like to hear a little more about what you took away from our discussion today. I've added a link in the chat box to take a quick one-question survey where we'd like for you to tell us 3 words to describe your next steps after participating in this webinar. The results of this survey will be in the form of a word cloud, so single word answers tend to work best. We'll give everyone a minute to respond and then look at everyone's responses together. In the meantime, we'd like to answer a few of your questions that have been submitted. If you have any questions still, feel free to click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and submit your question now. All right, thanks so much. Let me know if you have any questions.
All right, thanks, Sarah. So yeah, just if you can follow the link in the chat box and just put a couple of one-word, 3 little words in there that can help us better understand how you'll use this information, that will be helpful. So we've got a few questions that have come in. First, there was a question about whether the webinar will be shared out, and the answer is yes. We're going to share out the webinar, the recorded webinar, as well as the report. I'll send a follow-up email that will include links to those items. Next, it looks like there was a question about the time frame that the 20 hours work was accumulated. During our survey, we asked them to indicate how much they considered a a dose to be. So for most, this is 20 hours over the course of 1 year, or one student experience in the program. So that could be a summer, or it could be over the weekends or after school, but it was just kind of over the course of 1 year was generally what we saw. Let's see. The next question is, do you have an estimate of what % of youth in out of school time are served by large organizations like those you investigated? I do not. That's a great question, and one that we can probably get back to you about. We did ask programs to indicate the number of students that were served for those programs that were specifically focused on STEM that we interviewed and surveyed. And those really ranged quite dramatically. We had some that were, we had quite a few that served just, 100 to 250 students a year, whereas others serve upwards of, 13,000 or more, and so it really was a wide range of programs that, and the number of students that were served by those programs. Yes, and then there's a question about whether the specific programs that we studied, and so these were the programs that were studied through our landscape scan. These are the programs that we identified based on both our literature review, web search, as well as interviews with key informants, and also through partnership with Overdeck Family Foundation. So again, we had a much larger list that included a number of different programs that did not end up meeting the criteria for inclusion that we had set out. And so these are the ones that, that ended up meeting that criteria for inclusion. Let's see. Another question is, what family outcomes were measured and who did this? It's a good question. Also, what community outcomes were measured? So family outcomes, a number of programs measured just experience at STEM events, or some kind of showcases, or opportunities for families to engage with their youth in the program itself. So these, are opportunities for students, youth to show off what they've done. And so a number of programs measured the parents' or families' responses and see how they felt about that. But there wasn't a lot. There really wasn't a lot on how those family outcomes were measured. Community outcomes were similar. Some programs surveyed those community members that were asked to volunteer to be part of the program. So for some programs, they, for instance, ask engineers that are in the community to come on and to volunteer for the program and to provide that kind of mentorship within the program. These programs would then measure the experience that mentor, that community mentor, had whenever they were participating in the program. Others also measured outcomes based on showcases and demonstrations of knowledge, and just the community's experience and what they thought about those. I'll say too, a lot of the family and community outcomes, the way that they were described by programs, is often just through word of mouth and conversations with families and communities, and kind of being able to gather that up over time and demonstrate their success that way. So. The next question is, what strategies can be successful in reducing educator turnover? This is a great question, and one that we need further research on for sure. I think that one of the things that did come up was being able to build that deep learning and deep investment among educators as a key aspect of being able to reduce turnover. So pretty much providing those educators with opportunities to engage in professional development that not only helps them deliver program outcomes directly, but also provides them with an opportunity to develop their own skill sets in both STEM and in educating and the broader aspects of programming and of their own experience. And I think this was heard as one of the ways that programs try to reduce educator turnover and really provide opportunities for them to feel invested in the programming that they were working with. Additionally, train the trainer models were mentioned as one aspect. So pretty much for those educators who might feel as if they're kind of at the edge of what they're able to do within the program and what they're able to learn, offering them the opportunity to develop their skills as a trainer, help to keep that educator on for longer so that they could continue to train other, train the trainer, continue to train others and invest in other educators' outcomes. Let's see. Sorry, just looking through the Q&A. There's a few questions on here about the measures that were used, whether for direct observation or for others. We did, within our literature review, we went through and analyzed each of the items that we found. Again, these are publicly available data. They're kind of limited to our ability to find them. And I know that a lot of programs keep their reporting more internal. So we kind of just looked at those that were readily available. And in that process, we found limited use of kind of valid and reliable survey or observation measures. But for the most part, they were measures that were created either internally to the program or through partnerships with other external evaluators. So this could be a good opportunity for expansion and being able to kind of include more valid and reliable measures in evaluation strategies. See. We have a question on some leaders gave up on gathering information from families due to low survey responses. Do you have any recommendations for how that data can be successfully collected? I know, especially, yes, with our experience as researchers and evaluators at Education Northwest, I know that that can be extremely challenging to gather up that information from families and understand the challenges that are faced with that. I know that we have had some success, using things like incentives, some kind of drawing for items, but it can be a challenge. I think that one of the biggest things for survey response rates as a whole is making sure that the person who is receiving that survey and filling out that survey understands exactly what it's going to be used for and exactly the purpose and what their information that they've provided will go to do. And so I think for families, many times maybe they don't understand their role in out-of-school time STEM programming with students, with youth, and being able to better communicate their role and better able to communicate what their feedback can offer and the role that it can play in developing the programming and making sure that you've received the outcomes that that you've intended, can help them be more likely to respond to things like surveys and that kind of item.
Sometimes it also can be helpful to do it in conjunction with like a family night or something like that, where you could actually explain in person even what Ashley's saying, kind of the purpose, but also, coupling it with bringing them in for some other purpose, maybe providing food or something, something fun for them to do as well, can help as well.
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. That's a great point. Incentives don't necessarily need to be also tightly tied to the survey itself, but can also be just bringing in food, getting them excited and engaged in their experience, and that can really help. Thank you. Okay, I think we've got about 5 minutes left, so I want to push it back to Sarah. I know we didn't quite get to all the questions that you guys had, and thank you so much. We'll be sure to take these down and respond to any as we're able to in the upcoming days. So Sarah, do you, what have we found?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just share my screen really quickly. Let's see. Continue, and we will look at this word cloud. Okay. All right, so as you guys can see, we see a lot of people talk about wanting to move forward with research, with sharing, with scaling. Many mentioned planning or plans, focusing on the community, implementation, and just gathering information and data. This is really interesting. We'll make sure to share out this image with everyone so you all know what everyone plans on moving forward with.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarah.
You bet.
There we go. All right. So as we wrap up now, I just want to say a quick thank you to the program leaders and key informants that took time out of their busy days to talk with us and to fill out these surveys. I really appreciate the time that was taken out of busy schedules, and we had some truly engaging discussions that really make me excited for the future of this work. Also, a big thank you to all of our attendees today. I know this is a challenging time for everyone, and having you here in the midst of a pandemic is so encouraging for the future of out-of-school time STEM. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. My email address is located at the bottom of the screen, and I'm happy to answer any questions and provide feedback on what's going on.